Hello, friends and comrades of Midwestern Marks. We'll waste no time getting into it today. I got to leave for Chicago later. Um, and then tomorrow, taking a flight to Virginia for the Division III National Wrestling Tournament. But before I do that, I wanted to hop on live and do a quick stream, just talk about a couple things. Talk about For one, I want to recap some of my initial Nord Stream coverage that got me banned from TikTok and got us accused of being Putin apologists and Russian apologists, of course. That's what they call anybody who tells the truth about the NATO proxy war in Ukraine. But I just want to go back and show some of my coverage compared to the coverage of other so-called mainstream sources on TikTok and see how correct our coverage has been proven over time, because I think it's pretty interesting. Right now, TikTok, I created another account, and they took 4 of our videos down and told us we were banned from posting for violating community guidelines. So I appealed that decision. They put all 4 of the videos up, said, sorry, these don't actually violate our community guidelines, but they still haven't given us our ability to post videos back. So we're still banned from posting on TikTok. But that's neither here nor there. It'll be fun to review some of the old Nord Stream coverage. And then I also want to watch this Marianne Williamson interview with RBN. That was a bit of it got a little crazy. And I hadn't realized this had happened. I had seen RBN going back and forth with people on Twitter about Marianne Williamson, and I've tended to agree with them. And agree with what they've had to say about it. But it'll be interesting to watch this interview where they went head to head and ended up kind of yelling at each other. So how's everybody doing? Excited? Hello. Hey, yo. Yo. Howdy. Hey, everybody. Hey, how is it going? Without further ado, I'll play the intro and then we can get right into it. If I can find the darn intro. Boom. Love playing that intro every single time. So the first thing I want to cover here is a compilation of TikTok videos and, YouTube videos or YouTube shorts that I made when Nord Stream first was sabotaged, when the pipeline first blew up. So this was before we knew, without a shadow of a doubt, and knew the details about how the U.S. sabotaged this, which have been released through various sources, especially a recent article with Seymour Hersh, an anonymously sourced article that went into great detail as to how the U.S. pulled off this operation and who was in charge of it and who was behind it in Washington. And something Seymour Hersh recently said in an interview with Aaron Mate of The Gray Zone that I thought was really interesting was he said his friend wrote to him after he published the piece about Nord Stream. And his friend said, Seymour, you become the master of deconstructing the obvious. Because it was so clear to everyone from the get-go that the U.S. sabotaged the Nord Stream pipeline, because who else would have done it? Why would Russia sabotage their own pipeline? Why would Germany or any other European country want to sabotage this pipeline that's getting them natural gas and, heating the homes of a lot of people in Germany? So the U.S. was really the only country with the motivation to blow it up. So that was my coverage at first, despite the fact that mainstream media was accusing Russia and saying Russia is the number one culprit, which, I mean, reading that at the time, so there's the bar is set so low for corporate and mainstream media and U.S. media, what we could just call imperialist, finance capital dominated media, that, yeah, we don't expect anything from them. But the fact that they would be saying, jumping to the conclusion that Russia did this, it's just like, for anybody who has even any kind of conception of geopolitics and what is going on around the world should read that and be like, what the hell are you talking about? Why would Russia blow up their own pipeline that Joe Biden had threatened to blow up and said the U.S. would find a way to destroy if they, in fact, needed to do that, or if Russia invaded Ukraine? Like, of course, this was the U.S. sabotage. What in your right mind would lead you to believe it was a Russian sabotage? But, of course, U.S. imperialist media isn't thinking in their right mind. They're just doing propaganda and disinformation for the finance capitalist imperialist ruling class. But this was the coverage I did of Nord Stream when it first got sabotaged. That got me banned, got me accused of spreading misinformation, when in fact it was the mainstream media who were spreading misinformation the whole time.
And this is the most 2022 headline of all time. U.S. podcasters spread Kremlin narrative on Nord Stream sabotage. Those darn podcasters, don't they know that experts broadly agree Russia is the key suspect in the sabotage? Don't they know they're spreading conspiracies and the experts already decided that Russia did it? Wait a second, I'm curious though, who are the experts? Because most of the experts that I know don't think Russia sailed undetected all the way to Poland to blow up their own pipeline that they had invested millions of dollars into. Right next to NATO member country Germany, which forces most of Europe to rely on imports of liquefied natural gas.
And if you look at where the U.S. launched the operation from, it was literally like right here. It was, I believe it was like on the tip of this island was where the divers were located. I can't remember. We'll pull up the Seymour Hersh article after this. But like, I mean, obviously this shows where the leaks happen, but look how far away these leaks are from Russia and anywhere where the U.S. would be stationed, right? Versus you have all these NATO bases and NATO troops down here. So do you think it was Russia up here who did it and blew up their own pipeline? Or the NATO people who are located down here who have been threatening to blow it up? Like, this was not hard to predict. I'm not showing this old coverage to toot my own horn and say, I deserve a pat on the back because I predicted that the U.S. blew up Nord Stream. It was so obvious.
That's from the United States. So who are these experts? Oh, here they are. It's people like this. Wealthy Amazon executive. And this is another expert. He's a Western banking executive. And former U.S. State Department officials who work closely on foreign policy with Dick Cheney and Hillary Clinton.
So this part's interesting, actually, because I'm not taking an article here. I took an article that was saying Russia blew up the pipeline. But then I also looked at the source for that article, and it was the Brookings Institute. Those were their experts. So it was NGOs and political think tanks with a lot of money and a lot of power behind them who were, immediately pushing this narrative that it's Russia. And the most dubious, the most subservient news outlets, corporate mainstream news outlets, immediately picked it up and blasted that story. But originally the story stemmed from the top, from the think tanks and NGOs controlled by the most wealthy, powerful people in the country who largely determine our foreign policy and the proxy war in Ukraine.
So no conflict of interest there. You heard it here first, podcasters. Listen to the experts. I guess economics professor Jeffrey Sachs went on Bloomberg to talk about the Nord Stream pipeline, and they kind of freaked out. Let's check it out.
Is that the European economy is getting hammered by this, by the sudden cutoff of energy. And now, to make it definitive, the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline, which I would bet was a U.S. action, perhaps U.S. and Poland. This is
Jeff, we got to stop there. That's quite a statement as well. Why do you feel that was a U.S. action? What evidence do you have of that?
Well, first of all, there's direct radar evidence that U.S. Helicopters, military helicopters that are normally based.
So again, this is before the Seymour Hersh article came out. Jeffrey Sachs was saying, obviously the U.S. did it. Here's a handful of evidence. And these mainstream media figures, this Bloomberg guy, who looks like a cartoon version of a capitalist, are going to freak out on him.
In Gdansk, were circling over this area. We also had the threats from the United States earlier in this year that one way or another, we are going to end Nord Stream. We also have a remarkable statement by Secretary Blinken last Friday in a press conference that he says, this is also a tremendous opportunity. It's a strange way to, it's a strange way to talk if you're worried about the piracy on international infrastructure.
I want to get into tit for tat about what did or did not happen with Nord Stream, because I don't have the evidence and we don't have a counterbalance to this. There is an issue, though, that's at the heart of what you're saying, which is a lack of trust in the United States, a lack of cohesion in allies in the midst of incredible political as well.
Jeff, I don't want to get into a tit for tat about whether the U.S. is sabotaging infrastructure and moving us closer to nuclear war, as the media lies to the entire nation about what's actually going on. Okay, because the problem is that you're questioning U.S. global dominance in the first place. Can't we come together as media pundits and cheerlead war? It's in our tradition as American journalists. Also, this guy looks like a cartoon version of a capitalist. This man looks like he belongs on the game Monopoly. I'm pretty sure this is the inventor of corporate media. This man knew the Fox that invented Fox News. Corporate media is so bad. And don't forget the piece that I covered this morning from the Brookings Institute, where they say experts broadly agree that Russia sabotaged their own pipeline. And then their list of experts is a bunch of former State Department or intelligence officials, executives for... So yeah, that was the coverage I did before we even knew for sure how Nord Stream was sabotaged by the U.S. So it was easy to predict. Jeffrey Sachs predicted it, just by being an economist who pays attention to geopolitics. Like I said, it wasn't difficult. But, that was a video that was used to accuse us of spreading misinformation and got people to mass report our account, which got it deleted. So that kind of content is being suppressed on, an app like TikTok, which may not sound like a big deal, right? Or it might sound goofy because, TikTok, it's just a social media app, but it's the most popular or the fastest growing social media app in the country. It's the most popular social media app amongst kids that they're on all the time. And, anything telling them the truth about the world and what's going on in the world and what their country is doing is being systematically suppressed. And we know, thanks to Mint Press News and the journalism of Alan McLeod, that the people managing TikTok's content are literally former NATO operatives, literally former State Department operatives. So there's a direct connection between the State Department, the Pentagon, and these social media apps, and they're systematically controlling information and stopping people from getting the truth. While mainstream outlets, and even more so than mainstream outlets, but popular news creators like this one person who calls himself the News Daddy, or Philip DeFranco is one of the main ones who I used to debunk all the time on TikTok and get banned for it. They spread blatant misinformation. They jump to conclusions and do the most biased pro-US, pro-imperialist journalism you could possibly imagine, to the point of, spreading blatant untruths, blatant misinformation at points, as I'm about to show you. And not only do those videos stay up on TikTok, but they get boosted, right? And then you can literally look in Philip DeFranco's comments sometimes, and anybody spreading the truth, he's attacking and mocking and calling a puppet of Putin. So that is the kind of brainwashing that the youth of America are being filled with on TikTok,
while, anybody who tries to get the truth to them is being systematically censored and shut up. So here's another video I did. I believe this was after the Seymour Hersh article came out, and I was just sharing it with people, which, these videos did actually get quite a bit of traction, and people were pretty shocked by this. But this was also me taking a victory lap and being like, I was right, you dum-dums.
The famed investigative journalist Seymour Hersh just published a long and detailed piece about how America took out the Nord Stream pipeline. And holy cow, Midwestern Marx was right again. Can we have our 6 accounts that got banned back, please? And this piece covers everything. Who carried out the operation, where exactly they were trained, who were the main players inside Washington pushing for this and strategizing how to do it covertly. How was it then carried out? And afterwards, how did the media fail in their response? Calling people like us who said that the U.S. probably blew up the pipeline conspiracy theorists and whatnot. But that's why investigative journalism is cool. The truth always comes out. And the truth tends to make Western capitalist imperialism look pretty bad. Seymour Hersh has been proving that his whole career, honestly.
I'm sorry, that comment, that's the capitalist who owned the patent on the color blue about the Bloomberg guy. That was a hilarious joke. Thank you for that.
Famed investigative journalist Seymour Hersh just recently revealed that the U.S. blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, which is something that a lot of us knew from the beginning. But either way, it's so gross to watch the U.S. State Department and all their lackeys try to smear him as a conspiracy theorist. I mean, this is someone who's been exposing major U.S. war crimes since the 60s. The My Lai massacre in Vietnam, Abu Ghraib prison where the U.S. was torturing people to try and get justification to invade Iraq. For years, he's incurred the wrath of the U.S. State Department by exposing these things, and then you have comments like this. He's become a bit of a conspiracy theorist in his old age. Much of what he said since the 70s is just all BS. I don't have any evidence or proof, but everything I dislike is a conspiracy theory, so this is just not true. Hersh's reporting on Abu Ghraib in the 2000s was groundbreaking. And we know now, even more than we did before, that it's based on fact. And I'd be willing to bet almost anything that these smears against Seymour Hersh are being botted. We already know that 60 to 80% of Twitter accounts who post about the Russia-Ukraine issue are bots, 90% of them being pro-NATO or pro-Ukraine. So of course this is happening on TikTok, and these bots are being used to push a narrative and get accounts like ours banned. This is our 7th account, by the way. We've had 6 taken down for talking about stuff like this. Then you got comments like this. Source, I made it up. No, you made this up. I explained in my video that Seymour Hersh's piece is very well sourced. You see all these little underlined links here? Here, I'll circle them for you. These are called sources. And the reason that Hersh is such a successful and respected investigative journalist is because he's always well-sourced. I know it can hurt to see a well-sourced piece that goes against your preconceived narratives, but that doesn't make it false. And last but not least, this one's my favorite. The problem with the leftist community is that some of them devolve into radical skepticism that is based on previous occasions of government lying. Radical skepticism? You should be skeptical of everything, especially everything the government tells you. Why would you not be skeptical of everything the American ruling class and the government does? Look at their history. Skepticism is not a problem among leftists. Honestly, sometimes it's a lack of skepticism. A lot of people have just accepted and internalized the U.S. ruling class's narrative about Ukraine. And that's why a piece like this hits so hard and throws so many people into a tizzy. And it's also why we need investigative journalists like Mr. Seymour Hersh.
Philip DeFranco says Russia blew up the Nord Stream pipeline.
But it wasn't Russia. It was America, and we now know this. And many people tried to explain this to Mr. DeFranco when he released this video, but were laughed at, mocked, or smeared as puppets of Russia. If you look in the comments here, you see someone mocking those who were suggesting that the USA might have done this. Philip chimes in and says the massive amount of Russian trolls in this comment section blaming the US is the only proof we needed to indict Russia for it. It's all projection. So Phil, has your opinion changed now that we know that the US did it? Were you projecting the US's actions on?
So someone says, is this kid on TikTok doubting Hersh? He's been trusted for years. He's got sources in the government and has forever. That's why he's, such an incredibly famous and popular investigative journalists whose work is always taken so seriously, and why, even though it was easy to predict that the U.S. sabotaged the Nord Stream pipeline, why it was still important for Seymour Hersh to come out with that article, because then, it proves it even to mainstream folks. And then even people like Philip DeFranco can't publish videos accusing Russia of doing it. But because you have these influencers like Philip DeFranco constantly spreading this misinformation, constantly saying, everything critical of the U.S. proxy war is just Russian propaganda, Russian bots that you can't trust, when in reality they're, more NATO and pro-U.S. State Department bots that you can't trust than there are Russian bots. You have kids who believe these things. Like Seymour Hersh isn't someone they can trust. Seymour Hersh is literally a conspiracy theorist and a Russian propagandist, is what a lot of those comments were saying. It's because the app is systematically brainwashing kids. And there are even a lot of people who consider themselves leftists. And those might be bots or controlled opposition too, for all we know. There are a lot of people on this app calling themselves leftists who are like, Seymour Hersh is a conspiracy theorist and a Russian propagandist for correctly pointing out how the U.S. sabotaged the Nord Stream pipeline because connections within the government told him how it happened, which is why he was able to write a giant article detailing every step of the operation. It's just so stupid. But then, if I try and explain that, I get banned. I'm currently not allowed to post on TikTok, and this is our eighth account. 7 of them have been permanently banned. And the thing about that is I can always make a new one, but then our work is wiped out, right? So Philip DeFranco's video saying that Russia blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, blatant misinformation, is still up, and it still has millions of views. Whereas my videos explaining what actually happened and correcting the record, explaining how and why and where Phil was wrong, is removed forever. If you search Eddie Liger or whatever, or Midwestern Marks on TikTok, all you're going to get is a bunch of people responding to us and attacking us. And all of those people are people who I had responded to and, gotten a lot of traction with. And our videos are removed forever. And all that's left are the attacks on us, the smears of us being Russian propagandists and Russian bots. So it's a systematic censorship by these NATO operatives and State Department operatives who have taken over the TikTok app, which I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's true. It's a systematic effort to brainwash the youth, controlling the means of communication that the youth of America use. Wow. Thank you so much for the $50 super sticker, Kate. That is too kind, too generous. Thank you very much. Just so you know, if you give $10 on Patreon, I just want to let you know this because you're donating so much. You get a free ebook, or not a free one, but you get the ebook or the Journal of American Socialist Studies. You also get that if you become a member on YouTube for $10. But just want to let you know so you have that option available to you, because you just pretty much purchase 10 ebooks if you want, or I could just email it to you because this is awesome. So thank you so much for the super sticker. Thank you for your support. We would not be able to run Midwestern Marks without you and your support. Yesterday or today, we announced the release of Carlos's new book and what the cover is going to look like. And, obviously it's not super expensive, but it isn't free to publish projects like that. So without your support, it wouldn't be possible. And we really believe in those, and we think that they're going to help bring about change and help the struggle for socialism. So thank you so much for the major super chat.
Russia? Does this make you a U.S. troll or a NATO troll? I'm just asking these questions based upon your own logic. This person says, someone explain to me why everyone thinks it's the U.S. And Phil says, because Russia is running a disinformation campaign. Paid Russians start it, and then not so bright Americans spread it. Well,
so here's this jackass, Phil DeFranco, who posted this video about the Nord Stream pipeline that was an utter lie. An utter falsehood in the service of the U.S. State Department and NATO, who actually did sabotage the pipeline. He published a video saying Russia did it. That was not true. And then just one of these poor kids tricked into watching Philip DeFranco's nonsense because it's well produced and it gets a lot of views and the TikTok algorithm boosts it. Responds, or this kid says, someone explain to me why everyone thinks it's the U.S. who blew it up. And Philip DeFranco responds, because Russia is running a disinformation campaign on it. Paid Russians start it, and then not so bright Americans spread it. Not so bright Americans like me, who predicted the truth even a month or so before it came out. But I'm part of a Russian disinformation campaign, right? Not this guy who's probably getting NGO money or think tank money to spread blatant lies on TikTok is what he's doing here. And then when someone asks him, why does everyone think it was the U.S. when it was the U.S., he says because of Russian disinformation, and then calls people like me dumb. Am I dumb, Phil? Are you going to retract that and call yourself dumb because I was right and you were wrong? Or are you just going to leave your misinformation video up with your misinformation comments underneath it and let millions of more people be lied to by your wrong coverage because you're not a journalist, you're a propagandist? And this is the kind of stuff that gets us banned and gets people, including leftists, on our account calling us, Putin puppets and telling us we're spreading misinformation. We're part of a Putin propaganda campaign. A Putin it's Putin propaganda to tell the truth, right? You have to tell blatant lies in service of the State Department. Otherwise, it's Putin propaganda. Jeez, Phil, how much are they paying you, my guy? You who really sold out. What is that NGO money like? Tell me. I would love to know what it's like to be able to afford healthcare.
Well, I was one of the people spreading this narrative that it might have been the U.S. after the pipeline was sabotaged, and I had my account banned, as well as 5 other accounts. Part of the reason for this was because I was being accused of parroting Russian propaganda, but now we know that the thing you were calling Russian propaganda was actually true. So is there going to be any kind of apology coming out for the people who were smeared as Russian propagandists for actually knowing the truth and the historical context of the situation? I have a feeling there won't be, but either way, this is why I'm so critical of folks like Mr. DeFranco and all of the mainstream media pundits in the US. They'll often accuse others of spreading disinformation or being propagandists while spreading themselves what essentially amounts to pro-NATO propaganda. And in this case, with Mr. DeFranco's coverage of the Nord Stream pipeline, blatant misinformation, claiming that Russia did this and anybody who thinks the US did it is crazy when all along the US did.
So yeah, that's what's going on over on TikTok, aka hell. Someone says, this is the confusing thing about accusations of Russian propaganda in our media. It might be true, but maybe also lead to bigotry or wrong conceptions. Also, we're obviously biased toward Ukraine right now, so I'm not sure that your Russian propaganda would even be bad right now. LOL. There was a tweet today that said there's not that much Russian propaganda. Trust me, I've seen Russian propaganda. It's not that good. It's always got the same techno music playing over it. And it's just super patriotic. I promise you, no Americans are being swayed by Russian propaganda. And I thought that was a hilarious tweet and very true. And think of all the Americans who are against the U.S. NATO proxy war in Ukraine. Are there a lot of them who you think are just consuming Russian propaganda all day? They're just on YouTube, watching Russian propaganda video after Russian propaganda video, just these techno, Sigma edits of the Russian military, doing stuff, or is it people who just look into the history of the conflict, the facts of the issue, what's going on, the real geopolitical situation, and are like, oh, it's the U.S. State Department, U.S. NGOs, NATO, and essentially just the U.S. imperialist finance capitalists who have been provoking Russia, pushing us towards a proxy war, openly admitting that they were never going to follow the Minsk peace agreements. Russia really, it wasn't a question for them if they would have a conflict with Ukraine, but when. Do we, as Brian Berletic said today on Danny Haifong's show, or recently on Danny Haifong's show, which I recommend everyone check out, really good analysis of the conflict. Ukraine, the longer Russia waited, prolonged the conflict, that was just going to allow the U.S. to build up more military forces in Ukraine, which is literally what Angela Merkel said, right? If you think I'm being a conspiracy theorist by spreading this, look up what Angela Merkel said. She said the Minsk agreements was just, a way to buy time, so the U.S. could arm up Ukraine and train more NATO interoperable troops, which is what they had been doing despite Russia's warnings for months. So, what was anything pro-Russian gets censored anyway? People are really delusional. Yeah, right? Like if my content gets censored, just like spreading or telling basic facts about the conflict, or saying that Russia didn't blow up their own pipeline, that gets banned. You really think like actual Russian propaganda isn't going to get banned too if it starts to get big at all? Propaganda. I also like this comment. Propaganda doesn't have to be false, which is a thing people don't seem to acknowledge. Yeah, and usually in the history of socialist organizing, we're self-aware of when we're doing propaganda, right? Like my TikToks, for example, the vast majority of them are socialist or communist propaganda. I also do, everything I can to make them true and correct, and based on material evidence and facts and good journalism. Obviously I make mistakes like everybody does because I'm human, but it's still, I'm trying to convince people to become socialists, become communists, organize their workplace, organize their communities, and join a socialist or communist party and get really active within it. Like, the content I'm releasing has a specific purpose, and it's that, which makes it propaganda. That doesn't mean it's wrong, doesn't mean it's false, doesn't mean it's not useful and necessary. We just need to understand that the liberals are going to do propaganda too. It's just that their propaganda tends to lie. And we can do propaganda based in fact, because as socialists and Marxists, the truth is on our side. Ain't that right, Noah? Says, what's up, everybody from Noah's crew at work? What's up, Noah and the Carpenter crew? Thank you for giving us wood products. Thank you for building our houses and our walls and our doors. We will fight until the full value of your labor is yours and the product of your labor is yours. Hey, Eddie, did you manage to read my Google Doc college paper? I have not had a chance to read it yet, Jacob. I will probably read it this weekend when I'm at this wrestling event. I'm flying to Virginia for wrestling nationals. I'll probably have some extra time to read and stuff and go through emails, and I'll actually probably be in the Discord a lot in between sessions and stuff because I get bored and I don't have anything. I can't like stream or whatever. So I will give it a read this weekend, but thank you for sending it in. So should we check out the RBN throwdown with Marianne Williamson? First of all, before we play this, I kind of want to get a feel of like, how does the chat feel about Marianne? Are they pro Marianne? Are we anti Marianne Williamson running for president? Like, obviously, I mean, she's doing this whole thing where she's like, I'm running to the left of Biden. I am better than Biden. But she's ultimately just a reformist social democrat. And even if you listen to her specific policies, they're not that far to the left of Biden. And also, to the left, they're not that much more pro-working class than Biden's. And Biden is like this imperialist warmonger horrible man leading this proxy war in Ukraine that might push the whole world towards a nuclear war. You know, someone who talks about being progressive and a reformer and doing social justice reform, who played one of the leading roles in fighting for increased prison sentences and increased sentences for nonviolent drug offenders, while his son was doing crack cocaine and collecting thousands and thousands of dollars because he owns shares in random Ukrainian energy firms and stuff because his dad is Joe Biden. Like, it's not that hard to be more pro-working class than that guy. I'm sorry. Like, that cannot be your whole platform. I'm not going to get behind, you know, some hippie social democrat lady because she's a little bit better than Joe Biden. Joe Biden's terrible. So she's an establishment Democrat, basically. Who the hell is Marianne Williamson anyway? She's some lady who ran for president and endorsed Bernie in like 2020. And she like floated the idea of running third party, which, you know, made some people think she's like, oh, she's even further left than Bernie because Bernie capitulated to the establishment. But and now a lot of like, there's a lot of these media figures and a lot of people like Brianna Joy Gray is one of the better ones. But there's a lot of people who gained a lot of popularity online through the Bernie movement, former Bernie staffers and stuff. And obviously I worked on the Bernie campaign as an intern. So I'm super, super familiar with a lot of these people. And the campaign running, you know, against / with Marianne Williamson at various points familiarized them with Marianne. So now they have someone, you know, who's just willing to run against Biden maybe. And they're like, oh, you know, maybe this is the next Bernie. Maybe this is the next Bernie movement. When really, you know, we shouldn't be waiting on another Bernie. We should be moving beyond Bernie. We should be organizing worker combinations in our workplaces, in our communities, and running working class candidates wherever we can. We shouldn't be waiting for someone from the establishment or some leftover recycled from 2016 or 2020 to come along and start what the Bernie movement was. The Bernie movement happened because of the material conditions that people are living in. The Bernie movement happened because of 40 years of neoliberalism that have left people in a destitute economic situation, and someone came along and offered them a sliver of hope, right? But the idea is we got to move beyond that. We got to organize real organs of worker power, really educate workers about capitalism, Marxism, and how this system works, how we can change this system, and start building those sources of power from the ground up, you know, and getting through that process, finding natural working class leadership, truly working class leadership by, of, and for the working class to, you know, run our political movements and political operations, you know, not just crossing our fingers and hoping that one of these social democratic reformists will not be a sellout like AOC and the rest of them. So yeah, I feel like I'm going to agree with RBN, but our friends at the Revolutionary Blackout Network, who we're very, very tight with, big fans of pretty much everything they do. And, you know, some of them are more theoretically developed than others. This one, Nick, is a huge foreign policy guy. But their instincts are so good, right? When it comes to political and geopolitical issues and really anything, the instincts of RBN, they always side with the working class, right? And that's really all there is to it. They never, and they're very skeptical, especially after 2 Bernie campaigns. They're very skeptical of these social democratic reformists, these anti-revolutionary sort of political careerists. So here, I guess they pretty much got into it with Marianne. And some people would call this interview a disaster because Marianne ended up leaving, but I don't know. We'll see. And I think before this, they had been criticizing Marianne Williamson. So Marianne Williamson probably knew that, probably saw their criticisms on Twitter and knew that they might be hostile coming into the situation.
Candid, author, writer. Thank you for joining us on the Revolutionary Blackout, Marianne Williamson.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. Hi, Sabby. Nice to see you again.
Hey, nice to see you. I know it's been a minute.
It has, but I see you sometimes. And I saw you once, and I heard you say something like, well, I'll try to have her on. I sort of felt like, well, text me right now. You know, I expected to hear from you then.
Yeah, absolutely. So I appreciate you coming on and taking the time. We are extremely critical of efforts in running in the Democratic Party, and that's why.
Yeah, I know this.
Yeah, you probably have seen some criticism that we have.
Yeah, of course I have.
On rumors of you running, because I don't think it's official yet. And I want
Oh yeah, she's definitely heard the criticisms, and she's upset about them too. See, this is another one of the things about the PMC liberals and their theory of individualism is it makes it really difficult to take critiques, because you get critiqued and you feel like it's an attack on yourself, on your personality, on your career, right? Whereas, the proper way to take critiques is to look at them rationally. Divorce yourself from your ego and be like, okay, what is this person saying? And let's discuss this this criticism logically. You can already tell that Marianne is offended by the fact that they would dare criticize her and her electoral campaign.
pose this question to you, and then we can.
By the way, everyone read Noah's article. This is one of the coolest articles. Carlos has one called Che and the Man in Cuba, which is sort of about how to conduct yourself as a communist, how to interact with your community and your surroundings as a socialist or communist. And Noah has a really good one too, that's more specifically on that, called How to Conduct Ourselves as Communists, or you could call it Walk the Walk. Don't just talk about being about your community, actually be about your community, and actually try and be a stand-up person and someone that other people can rely on. One of my favorite articles that we published. And we talked about this recently with Dr. Anthony Montero, who has a ton of experience actually organizing on the ground and knew, a lot of the Black Panthers, and organized with Henry Winston and W.E.B. Du Bois, or people who knew these heroes of the revolutionary movement in America. And he was telling us how these leaders like Henry Winston would always be on time, right? And would always be dressed pretty well and well taken care of, and would always follow up if there was an action that the party carried out. He needed to know, how did it work? What were the results? What can we tweak to make it better? What do we do next? There was always follow up, just very organized. And then he also said, very kind to everyone, always willing to listen, always willing to discuss, take criticism, and do what was best for the group in the end. So, that's just a good thing to have that is counter to some of the values of individualism that liberalism preaches. This is a good way to combat liberalism.
I usually have free flow conversation about a few questions. Then Savvy will jump in with some questions as well. I worked on the Bernie campaign, quit my job, put a lot of labor hours into the Bernie campaign. I know I had so many conversations, met with people, talked to people who was broke, struggling, who was still donating money to the Bernie campaign. $100 million spent by the working class on the Bernie campaign. And what did we get? We got a guy in a movement who threw away his political revolution, who abandoned his outside game, and what I consider $100 million thrown in the drain. Now, what we got by investing that kind of money is literally PR agents of the Democratic Party. Bernie Sanders is a war pig who's funding war. They're all apologizing for the same things they used to criticize Trump for. So I see that as a massive waste of the working class money to do that again, especially someone running in the Democratic Party, and someone I view as being a little bit too soft on Biden Democratic Party. So I'm gonna ask you, why do you think people should invest in your campaign, considering what we already wasted?
Wait to see how organized and professional RBN becomes towards the end of this interview. Truly revolutionary. I mean, that is one of my criticisms of them in this interview too, especially the guys. I mean, they'd lost control of their emotions. I haven't seen the whole thing, but I skipped to the end, right? And they didn't remain composed. But from the start, Marianne is the one coming in, angry at them for criticizing her, and they're staging these criticisms very respectfully. So I will refrain judgment, but I mean, the walk the walk thing, the Noah article about how to conduct yourself as a revolutionary, right? That could be a criticism of me, that could be a criticism of you, that could be a criticism of RBN. That applies to everyone. Not just I'm not just going to give RBN a pass because I like them. But in the beginning of this interview, it more so applies to Marianne.
Well, I think much of what you said is a legitimate argument. I think there are a lot of legitimate points to be made here. One of the times I saw you, Sabby, you were mentioning something that I said about running as a Democrat and being nostalgic for the Democratic Party of FDR. And you said on your show, oh, Marianne, that Democratic Party doesn't exist anymore. Well, you're right, actually. And that's why I was hoping you were actually going to I almost want to say, well, let me on, because you're right. And I certainly understand someone your age, you haven't even seen that Democratic Party, whereas I at least have some institutional memory. My point to that is, so the corporatist Democrats would say to progressives that we're trying to hijack the party. They hijack the party. Now, your argument seems to be, then don't even give any money or anything to do with the Democratic Party. I can see that argument, but to me, there's another argument which aligns with my view more, which is, first of all, I don't agree that Bernie Sanders made no difference. Medicare for All is now a mainstream issue in a way that it would never have been had he not run. The whole idea of the egregious gap between the functioning of this government and advocacy for the working people of the United States, I don't think would be in the mainstream dialogue the way it is had Bernie Sanders not run for president. And I also think and once again, I'm not saying you should do it, but I do say if all of us say to hell with the Democratic Party and just leave, then you're going to have two. Already we have a corporate duopoly. Already we have a situation, we have one party completely bought and sold by the corporatists. We have another party which tries to have it both ways. But if we all leave, then you've got two major parties doing that. So
if we all leave, we can put our energy into something that actually works. If we all leave, we can put our energy into a communist or socialist party that actually serves the working class. If we all remain within a bourgeois party that is never going to work for our interests, then we're using our energy and our time and our resources to further the interests of that bourgeois party instead of the working class, which was the problem with Bernie, which is what a lot of people realized after the campaign. And they started moving towards Marxism and socialism and revolutionary socialism rather than reformist socialism. But a lot of people are still stuck within this Democratic Party framework and architecture. And it makes sense for someone like Marianne. She's been a public figure since the 90s, pretty much a member of the political establishment at this point, like a C-list member. So it makes sense that she would still want to work within that structure and within that organization. And hold out hope for it. But for working class people like RBN watching from the ground are like, no way, right? This party's never going to serve my interests. And every time I put time, energy, and resources into this party, like I did when I worked for the Bernie campaign as an intern, spending hours knocking on doors and organizing people to come vote, and it amounts to nothing. It's like, well, oh shit, where could I have put my resources and my energy? Right? Where could I have organized that would have actually amounted to something in a way that would have actually been fruitful? Not within the Democratic Party, I'll tell you that. So that's all the Democratic Party does. It's a co-opter of revolutionary energy. Right? That's what having people stay within the Democratic Party does, Marianne Williamson.
I simply submit that it is as legitimate, those of us who feel like working within the Democratic Party, as those working out. To me, the break.
You guys sound revolutionary energy. So the working class, we only have a finite amount of resources. We're not like the corporations. So neoliberals and the conservatives, they can spend endless amount of money on this cash. That $100 million is $100 million they're not going to.
Yeah, but that was a working person who gave $5 or gave $10, or I would argue that many people I know who are working people who gave $5 or $10 feel that money went towards Bernie being able to put on the stage the ideas that he did. I feel the same way about my talking about reparations.
I hear what you're saying. Yeah. And Bernie abandoned his outside movement. Like we had marches for Medicare for All that we couldn't get the people to tweet about. And Medicare for All as a movement within the Democratic Party is dead. And Bernie killed the revolutionary energy needed while people was asking and demanding Medicare for All by now telling people that the Democratic Party and Biden is okay. Biden said he would veto Medicare for All.
This is an interesting comment that revolutionary optimism and communism literally saved my life. Yeah, I mean, I meet a lot of people who are just realizing that the Democratic Party is not the way to go or achieve change. And they are literally depressed. They are literally depressed because they put so much time and so much energy into organizing for something like the Bernie campaign. And then it fizzles out. It's crushed by the DNC and the Hillary Clinton wing of the party. And then now Bernie's cheering on the proxy war in Ukraine in Washington while AOC and the squad refuse to fight for Medicare for all or anything, right? So when you see your efforts amount to nothing, amount to more neoliberalism, it is depressing, right? But when you realize that there's another option, that revolutionary socialism is an option, and if we actually focus our organizing efforts somewhere fruitful, focus them on community and workplace organizing, on organizing a real working class party, real working class organs of power, we can actually achieve change by waging class struggle. We just have to get away from this bourgeois PMC apparatus of neoliberalism that is the Democratic Party. That literally makes people depressed. Because, I mean, it's also because the Democratic Party's their true nature, their substance, is to serve the capitalist ruling class, is to serve finance capitalists, Wall Street shareholders, and big banks, just like the Republicans. But they give this form of appearance. They tell this lie that they're better than the Republicans, and they're still looking out for the working class and the unions, at least somewhat, you know, and they're still or they're actually compassionate, and they're trying to make people's lives better, whereas the Republicans aren't. Right? So if you actually buy into that lie and you believe it to be true, and then reality constantly shows it to not be true, that is depressing. But, you know, the answer is get the hell away from the Democratic Party and liberalism.
There's not even a discussion on the public option. So there's no argument to be made that we've gone forward on the healthcare issue. We have gone backwards because now you got progressives, DSA, sheep herding people to the Democratic Party that would never give you Medicare for all.
Well, I think we have gone forward in terms of a mainstream conversation. Listen, I'm not here as Bernie Sanders' PR agent, and you have your views and I have mine, and I think that's really what this is all about. None of us have a monopoly on truth. I think all of us have pieces of it. Truth is a kaleidoscope to me. And, you know,
I just want to.
I want to get you in on this, and I just want to ask a follow up to that because I want to make sure I ask the original question, because I didn't want you. I wasn't trying to put you on the back heel defending Bernie. The question is like, why after that investment, seeing how disappointing these politicians and some of those people you still apologize for, why should we make that?
Wait, why you say some of those you still apologize for? Who am I apologizing for?
Like Bernie has been a massive disappointment. So what I'm saying, like, even if you don't run, because that's just a rumor, our criticism is running within the Democratic Party and wasting resources and energy that should be spent on third parties and outside mutual aid organizations. So my question is, why should people invest in your campaign after seeing the waste that I would consider a waste, after seeing him support war, being responsible for?
You're much better off putting your time and effort into an organization like RBN than Marianne Williamson's campaign, to be honest. And obviously I feel the same way about Midwestern Marx. But of course I'm biased. My ego gets in the way, that I think, you know, the work we're doing is more valuable than the work of someone like Marianne running slightly to the left of Biden within the Democratic Party with no chance in hell of winning. But, you know, even RBN, they do these community organizing projects. They do mutual aid projects. They build benches with communist artwork on them all around the city, which the police have been, you know, found destroying and throwing in dumpsters. Right? All that stuff builds community, builds real worker combinations, brings people together, builds the socialist ethic of being in community with your neighbors and the people around you, and doing things for them, or meeting their material needs. Telling people when the ruling economic class, the capitalists, and the government doesn't take care of you, the communists will. Right? That is what RBN is doing, and that is so much more valuable from a class struggle standpoint and from a revolutionary standpoint than running some center-left campaign through the Democratic Party. So if you're planning on, you know, putting a bunch of time and organizing energy into Marianne Williamson, think about giving it to RBN, or, you know, helping us out at Midwestern Marx. Come help us edit videos, or if you're skilled, you can help us film videos. But, you know, every dollar I spent on, like, I don't regret all the time I spent working for the Bernie campaign, you know, because it did allow me to get in the community. It allowed me to meet a lot of good people and a lot of good socialists and a lot of good organizers in the community. So I don't regret and it allowed me to learn a lot of things, learn how the Democratic Party operates, learn how they stifle these, you know, revolutionary campaigns. So I don't regret the time I spent, but every dollar I gave to like AOC's campaign or Bernie's campaign, yeah, I regret that. I'd take it all back and I'd give it to someone like RBN, or I'd put it towards furthering Midwestern Marx.
for Raytheon and Boeing making record profits, that's a waste. He did not do what we sent him to do. So why should people invest in that same?
Well, first of all, that's your view. I don't even see Bernie exactly as you do. But if I run, people should hear what I say. And if they believe what you believe, then they shouldn't vote for me. This is a democracy. This is what a democracy is about. You have your view. I have my view. And I don't think, there's a saying in AA, attraction, not promotion. I'm not going to be trying to manipulate anybody into seeing it the way I see it. I'm going to put out what I believe, and people will do what they want to do. And I think in terms, particularly those of us who are aligned on so many issues, we shouldn't let the fact that we see things differently in this area or that area keep us from working towards a cohesive movement that would be a fundamental economic reform in this country.
This is interesting. Noah says it's a bizarro world. This party of billionaires literally asking poor working class people for what little money we have. Yeah, and I mean, the Bernie campaign kind of changed the game in terms of donations, because Bernie realized that if you promise people something, if you actually promise to give them health care or cancel their student debt or something very minor, then people will get excited and they'll give you their money. So he out fundraised a lot of these corporate candidates getting corporate money, which, those corporations then develop PACs and, fund advertising and do think tank and NGO influencing on their own time. So the odds are still stacked against someone like Bernie, even if they manage to raise more money technically. There's still more money going against them in the political system overall. But he kind of changed the game in showing how effective raising small dollar donations can be. So now you have all these corporate vultures like Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton esque politicians, Democratic establishment politicians, trying to go to the poor working class people and beg them for every cent. Beg them for every dollar they have. And as I said, give that money to Midwestern Marks or give that money to RBN, even if it's not us, forget us. Give that to RBN. Give it to a Communist Party chapter that is doing a lot of real good work. Not to Democratic campaigns. Please, as somebody who has worked within Democratic campaigns thoroughly, if you want to see change or revolutionary change in this country, do not give your money to the Democratic Party.
Yeah, thank you.
So Marianne, you mentioned reparations. That's one of the questions that I had is, a while back we had this discussion about reparations. I think you educated a lot of people when you came on to talk about that. And since then, I've talked about it every now and then here and there. And other people have come on that are reparations activists trying to push for that as well. In 2020, for your presidential campaign, that was your number one issue. And so I'm curious, if you do decide to run in 2024, will that still be your number one issue? And if so, how will you persuade the segment of the progressive or the left per se that is against reparations? Because when I do have these discussions on my show, I notice the audience is 50-50, 50% is for it and the other 50% is no, don't talk about it because it's divisive. How will you persuade those progressives that are against reparations?
If I run, the government.
This is an interesting question. I just want to say one thing before we listen to her answer. I've told this story before about the March Against Corporate Greed that Bernie organized. So this person says, I still get Bernie and Biden donate to me emails. Yeah, and a lot of that Bernie money, a lot of the money you give to Bernie for his political revolution would go to the DNC, he would give to the Democratic Party, would give to mainstream establishment candidates like Biden. And at the March Against Corporate Greed, we did this, it was supposed to be like a Democratic Party fundraiser. But instead, Bernie had his whole base of support come. We all showed up. We all marched against this fundraiser happening and against it even existing and against the Democratic Party and the corruption. Right? It was supposed to be a march against political corruption by Bernie's base of people who are demanding a political revolution, political change. So then we all go sit down and we have dinner paid for by the campaign, which was cool after the march. Good way to bring people together and build community. And we watch Bernie give his speech at this Democratic Party fundraiser. And we're like, what's he going to do? Is he going to tell him to F off? Is he going to say, I don't want your money or whatever? And he goes up there, gives mild, tepid criticism of the Democratic Party, and then gives them $50,000 or some insane amount of money. I shouldn't say 50,000. It was a lot of money, though. Over thousands of dollars of money that people had donated to the campaign. Poor and working people had given to the campaign like $2-3 at a time, a lot of times. He turned around and gave that to the DNC. He gave it to the Democratic Party in front of us after we all did this march against corporate greed. It's like, so we're going to march against corporate greed and march against the existence of this fundraiser before you participate in it? Like, what are we even doing here? And that just shows how the Democratic Party is structured and how you can't work within the Democratic Party. You can stage a strike or a march against corporate greed, but the candidate you're marching for is then going to go engage in corporate greed and give your hard-earned money to establishment pro-war candidates. So that's exactly how it co-opts the time and energy and resources of revolutionary-minded people, working-class people. And that's why Marianne Williamson isn't worth our time. And Nick and Sabby are correct here. I'm sorry.
The governing principle, the governing strategy is to say what I think needs to be said. It's like I was just saying to Nick, it's not about persuading. I'm going to say what I think. And I'm going to say what I would do if I were president. And then you either vote for me or not. I'm submitting the belief.
Oh, that is such liberal individualism. It's not about persuading. It's about saying what I think. No. This is why Lenin created democratic centralism. We vote democratically what is best for the party, what is the best course of action. And then once that course of action is decided upon, once that course of action has been democratically decided to be the best for everyone, the best strategy, then we carry out that strategy. And if you have strong opinions, you can persuade people within the meetings, right? You can try and organize a coalition to vote in favor of what you want. You can debate it out, but after that's done, you carry out the policy because you don't want a bunch of individualism and division within the party, right? It makes the party look bad. It makes them look like they don't have a cohesive vision. It makes them look unserious, like they can't get things done. Versus a party that has a very simple platform and that's unified, and that is entirely focused on serving the working masses, on serving the working populace of this country, of whatever specific country that communist or socialist party is in. Not to say Marianne's a communist or socialist, but we're talking about getting revolutionary political change here. It makes that party look unified, and it allows you to get things done, and it allows you to create good strategies that are based on winning people over, not based on individualism and the morality of individuals. So that's why democratic centralism is a thing for Marxist-Leninists. But for Democrats, for individualists, especially, center-left politicians who have been floating around in the political establishment for the last 30 years, like Marianne Williamson, it's just, it's just about saying what I think. It's about saying what I want. No, we should debate the issue of reparations and decide a strategy going forward on it. And we should decide, form a strategy based on serving the needs and the interests of the working masses of our country. We shouldn't just take positions or advocate positions based on what Marianne Williamson thinks. And even her herself should recognize, right, that if she thinks something, if she has her own personal position that's not popular at all and isn't going to win people over, she should just keep that to herself.
That this country cannot move forward without healing our past. I submit that there is a debt that is owed. I submit that we have, we had 250 years of slavery. We had, except for the 12 years of Reconstruction, another 100 years of institutionalized suppression of Black people in the American South. I probably talked to you before, Sabby, on your show about how I've had the experience many times with white audiences feeling there's such undereducation that when they really see it, they go like, yeah. Right? I believe that that's the job of a president and of a candidacy to put something out there as a kind of huge bully pulpit. And now we had in the 1960s, we had the Voting Rights Act, which has been gutted. We had the Civil Rights Act. I think that if King had lived, and if either Johnson or Humphrey had been president next, I think there's a good chance it would have gotten to the third piece that's necessary, and that's economic remuneration. And until
well, I mean, I think that's why Martin Luther King was killed. And we did talk with with Dr. Anthony Montero, who told us a lot about Henry Winston, about how harmful Martin Luther King's assassination was to the nation, right? But it was at that point where he started saying, okay, now we have, it's no longer separate but equal. We can drink from the same water fountain, but we need economic redistribution. And Martin Luther King was calling for essentially a socialist economic system. And he was a mainstream, extremely popular political figure at the time. So that's when he's killed with, intelligence agency involvement, when he starts threatening the interests of capital. But yeah.
Until we do, we will be handing this toxic baton one generation to the next. The chances of, see the value of the fact that I'm not from that system, the chances are so minuscule that I would become president. There's nothing to keep me from saying what I really believe, whether somebody agrees with me or not. I believe we owe reparations. If part of the left doesn't like it, it's no different than my beliefs about anything else. Somebody doesn't like it, it's not, I'm a grown woman. I'm going to say what I believe needs to be said. I'm going to hear other people's opinion because sometimes, none of us have a monopoly on truth and I might be changed, but I don't see my opinion being changed on reparations because to me, it's a moral issue. It's a spiritual issue. It's a psychological issue as well as a
I just said all of her own opinions are based on her own individual personal morality, and that's a very liberal idea. And so, she even says it's a moral issue, it's a spiritual issue, it's a psychological issue. Like, all of these things are individualized and subjective. Like, no, it's a collective issue because you're running to be a politician and make decisions and laws that affect the entire country collectively. So it's not just about what you see in your crystal orb as being best. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself with the orb joke.
An economic issue, and I would love nothing more than to be the president who says we don't need another commission to gather evidence. We know the evidence. Let's sit down. Let's do some negotiation. Let's get this done. The very thought is so exciting to me. It's worth running for president.
I'll pass it to Nick.
Great question, Sabby. Reparations is something that I'm very passionate about. That's something that I gave props to you.
Look at Jay. Can we ask her about Ukraine, please? He's just getting antsy in the chat. He wants him to go for the hard-hitting questions. Talk about Ukraine. Why are all these reformist social democrats who tell us to support the Democratic Party supporting the NATO proxy war in Ukraine? Ask her. I want him to ask her about Ukraine, too.
Before as well. And that's actually kind of through the tweet that I mentioned before. But it's good to be good on the issues of reparations. The problem is the Democratic Party would never ever give us that without this kind of struggle. And that's why
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, unless we elect more progressives. This struggle that you're talking about of suppressing progressive voices on the presidential level, as I'm sure you realize, occurs the same way on the congressional level. They suppress on the primary. Look what they did to Nina Turner. Even the Progressive Caucus didn't support her. Even the Black Caucus didn't support her.
Yeah, so why would we put all our effort into this party if, real progressive candidates are going to be suppressed every time? And then when we actually get them elected, like AOC, they immediately turn on us and start buddying up to Nancy Pelosi and becoming part of the establishment. Why would people who actually want change put all their effort into this? You're helping to make Nick's argument, Ms. Williamson.
So that corporatist element suppressing progressive voices in the Democratic Party occurs on the congressional level, just like it does on the president. And the only way to override that is through a massive political revolution at the ballot box. So where you take that to go third party, that makes me say we got to get in there. And I don't think either of us is wrong. I just think we have to do everything, whatever our gut says, our heart, go for it. That's
I love the energy, and I never dissuade people from taking their shots. And I always say that our focus should be 15% electoral politics, not that much. That 15% is organizing for stuff like reparations and class wins. I have a theory. I'm not sure if I'm 100% right, like we all said, but I have a theory that, especially with, as you said, Black Caucus, Democratic Party, you got all these neoliberals that are against reparations. There is no way that as a Black community, we are getting what we want politically through the two-party duopoly. We are 13% of the population, and both parties wedged that. They wedged that against us. And we voted for the Democratic Party at 90% rate every single year. So they don't even run on our issues. Everyone else get their issues except ours. Yeah. The only theory I have of change in terms of electoral politics, which I wouldn't put that much stock in, the only theory of change that makes sense to me is as Black people and our allies, we form third parties, and then we force the politicians to carve that support. So if you lose an election as a Democrat because you lost a Black vote, I guess the next candidate has to run on reparations then, right? So that's why third parties have to be a leveraging tool of our community who gets nothing. Under the Biden administration right now, Black Americans are weak. Our community has been destroyed. The police is stronger than ever. We get nothing going through this strategy. So with 50, this is my question. 50% of Americans said they're ready for a third party. So we need that spark. We need something that will start that. So we need people that.
That's such a good point. If you have a third party that's actually connected to the workers and that's actually advocating for real change, that gives you so much more leverage over the Democrats than working within the Democratic Party, right? Working for politicians who might be slightly to the left of like Joe Biden, who are either going to be crushed by the DNC like Bernie or just co-opted by the establishment like AOC, right? There's no real leverage that we gain from putting all of our time and energy into various progressive Democratic Party establishment politicians. But if you have an actual party that can threaten them and threaten to steal their voter base, yeah, they're going to freak out and be like, you're helping the Republicans. Whatever. We still have a lot more leverage that way than through the Democratic Party itself, which is designed and structured to co-opt and steal revolutionary energy and funnel it towards the establishment.
Is one to run third party to start this spark. So I want to ask you this, like, what is your objection towards doing that, if there is one?
Well, first of all, there was a lot of teeth in the first things that you said. This issue of the Democratic Party being taken for granted, I mean, Black America being taken for granted by the Democratic establishment. But I would argue that you would, if Black America wanted to say to the Democratic establishment, don't take us for granted, voting for someone like me would be as effective as voting for someone in a third party.
Right, Couch? Like, these are still the talking points we're on? We'll just vote for more progressives. We just need to vote for enough AOCs and then we'll all have health care. Like, I was just thinking that when I was explaining how the Democratic Party co-ops like people's energy. I'm like, this is the reason I became a communist. This is the reason I became a socialist. Because I realized through the Bernie campaign that the Democratic Party was useless and it was going to co-opt any revolutionary energy that we were able to organize. And that we needed to put our energy elsewhere towards real working workplace community organizing and towards a third party, socialist or a communist party. So I feel like these discussions are like 3 years old at least. And the fact that so many people who call themselves socialists are ready to jump on the Marianne Williamson bandwagon, it's like, wait, have we learned nothing? But really what it is, and I was saying this on Twitter in a conversation with some of the RBN folks, it's not that the working class is ready to jump on board with Marianne. It's that all these former Bernie people, these political careerists or people who have their news shows or whatever on YouTube that started with the Bernie campaign, that had their origins in the Bernie campaign, a lot of those people are now trying to recruit Marianne Williamson or push Marianne Williamson, or even, a lot of people like Kyle Kulinski who are associated with Bernie and AOC and the, progressive wing of the Democratic Party who supports proxy war and neo-Nazis in Ukraine, because that's what progressives do. But it's more so the professional managerial class. Right, a small segment of the professional managerial class that considers themselves left or progressive or socialist or left of the Democratic Party. It's like, oh, maybe Marianne's the next Bernie. And the working class, the people who have moved towards revolutionary socialism since Bernie, are like, how about no?
Because you're still outside the context of the corporatists who are running on the same old, same old. Bernie Sanders, despite the things that you said, many of which were true, did come within striking.
I believe in Bernie, but sorry, go ahead. I was just saying it was disappointing, man. But sorry, go ahead. Man.
I understand, and I understand. I get it. I totally get it, and I agree with that.
No, you don't get it though, because you're wealthy. You're wealthy. You're part of the professional managerial class. You're not part of the poor and working masses, so you don't get why it was such a big disappointment. Like, I get kicked off my parents' health care in a month, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do. And I know there are so many Americans in the same situation, and 40,000 of them who die every year because they don't have health insurance, right? And then when Bernie says he's going to fight for Medicare for all, and we organize really hard for him, but it gets crushed, right? You say that you understand that disappointment. No, you don't, because you have health care. Because you have your needs met, so you don't get it.
Bernie Sanders came within.
You don't get the desperation to put our energy somewhere that actually brings about change.
Striking distance of the presidency. You know, the way I look at it, and once again, I don't think this is really an issue of right or wrong. This is an issue of a lot of ways to look at it, and everybody having to find where they feel their skill set can be most helpful. Bernie, if I run, and I run as a Democrat, it's going to be very inconvenient for the Democratic establishment. They will want to invisibilize me. But if I run as a third-party candidate, it will be so easy to do that. I feel that if I'm in there, I can get in there. I can say, Joe Biden, you got to debate me. I can go in there. I can put these things on the table.
They're not going to put you on the debate stage. Like, what gives you the idea that you're going to be able to bust up the Democratic Party? That's just naivety and liberal careerism. The only thing that this is going to do is boost your public profile, Marianne. Use a bunch of people's campaign donations to boost your public profile and make you slightly more famous so you can release another book. Right? You're not going to go into the Democratic Party and fix it all for us. We've heard this before.
So yeah, I think there need to be vital third-party efforts. I don't think that I'm the one to do that. And by the way, too, phenomenal mysticism. Marianne Williamson is ultra uncomfortable during this interview. You can feel it. No, I'm not.
I just want to jump in really quick and say,
what the hell was that? She didn't even explain it. No, I'm not. She's like, no, I'm not uncomfortable. Yes, you are. You can tell you're uncomfortable. And what was that response? She didn't even explain it. It's like, no, I'm not. Oh my God. Are we almost to the end of this? I'm going to put it on 1.5. It's entertaining, but I just don't want to go on forever.
why not? Like, I've kind of changed the focus, at least like on my show, to focus more so on local politics, because in reference to the progressive policies and progressive issues, I've seen them pass on the local level. So I'm kind of fortunate. I'm in Massachusetts. We've passed a lot of these things, the $15 minimum wage, the wealth tax. We've already passed a lot of those issues, but I've also seen red states pass those issues as well, Marianne.
Like Kansas with the abortion thing recently. That's where ground zero is now. Is on local and state. Absolutely.
Exactly. So looking back at it, I look at people like some of the members of the squad, and I feel that people like Cori Bush, AOC, I feel like they actually would be more effective on the local level. They went into Congress, they went into the swamp, and they're obviously heavily controlled by Democratic leadership. That's one of the issues that Dennis Kucinich had. That's one of the issues that Cynthia McKinney had, is that they call the shots. Why not run for something on the local level? Or is that something that you have considered?
If I woke up one morning and I'm going to run for city council, I'd run for city council. I'm interested in changing the conversation in this country. And there is no platform for changing the national conversation like a presidential candidacy. And I'm fortunate.
There is no platform for raising my public profile and raising the market for my next book like running for president. You know, running for city council, that would be hard. And I wouldn't get very much national attention, right? And I wouldn't have all the eyes on me. But if I run for president, I can do that, and I can make it all about myself and my own morality.
And that I do have, being an author, having a national audience, I feel that my great...
This is worse than I thought. Was there anyone... There were a few people in the chat who were saying that this interview made RBN look bad. Maybe towards the end, but Marianne's campaign is ridiculous. That's what I get from this interview.
Greatest contribution is to bring up certain topics that are not convenient to the system, to talk about genuine fundamental economic reform that, as Nick has pointed out, is not now occurring, the larger dynamic of American history, the aberrational chapter of the last 50 years, and the massive theft from the middle class and the poor in this country. I feel the way I can make the most powerful impact to make that case, to say it in a way that matters, if it would be to run, if in fact it feels like I can run. If I can't put together enough of a campaign to make...
I love how they're just pulling up all these comments in their chat, roasting her. Like, never vote blue no matter who. One of them said, what are you going to do when the DNC screws you? She's just like continuing to ramble on.
If you give it enough heft, then I won't do it. That's the period I'm in now, is discerning that. But that's what I want to do. I want to help upgrade the national conversation in the direction of justice.
Marianne, I know you only have around 20 minutes, so I appreciate your time. Any final question that you have, Sabi? Any final thoughts or any last words you have before we send you off? Sabi,
just one about foreign policy, because this is an area.
Look, Nick's totally calm. He's totally calm. for now. I mean, they're about to end the interview, though, and all he's done is ask questions respectfully, and it's made Marianne super, super nervous. So I get how this interview could offend the sensibilities of liberals. But what this interview does for me is completely expose Marianne Williamson as an opportunist, like Jacob said. I mean, that's all it comes down to. This is all it is, right? Like, there's no more of an idealist strategy or an idealist goal for your campaign than I want to raise the level of the national conversation towards justice. That does not mean anything, right? And everything that she said is just, I want this larger platform. I want to be, in the national conversation, right? It's about getting eyes on her and continually talks about, this is what I think. I'm a grown woman. This is about my morality, my spirituality, my psychology, right? It's all individualistic. It's not I'm going to serve the working class. It's not I would run for city council because that might be more effective in changing things at a micro level, because that doesn't bring her enough attention. And of course, one of the main things that she does for income is write books. So this is going to hugely increase the market for her books and her book sales. So really what this interview has done is expose Marianne's campaign as an opportunist campaign that socialists, working class people, and revolutionaries don't need to support. It's interesting that people on Twitter were trying to make it seem like this interview made RBN look real bad. I mean, at the end, a couple of CJ comes in and he's upset. I mean, we'll get to that in a second, but I mean, they could have controlled their emotions a little better, but the first 21 minutes of the interview, they did great.
Where the president can act alone and doesn't necessarily need the approval of Congress. So I'm curious to hear your feelings and your thoughts about the war between Russia and Ukraine right now. Like, how would you respond if you were president of the United States? And also in reference to Israel and Palestine, how would you respond in those particular situations?
So why don't we do Israel and Palestine, okay? Israel and Palestine is a very, it's really bad right now. Netanyahu's new government is the most extreme far-right government that's ever been in the history of that country. As bad as it has always been, really, for the Palestinians. Now, everything's worse. It's a real anti-democratic authoritarian direction. And it absolutely must be confronted. Clearly, the occupation a prolonged occupation like this is against international law. Clearly, the settlements are against international law. Clearly, international law says that if you do occupy territory, then you must use the resources of that territory for the benefit of the people. Biden seems to have kind of taken a hands-off approach at this point, and the American president must stand up more forcefully. The United States.
Biden has taken a hands-off approach to Israel. Is that what you call giving them $3 billion to buy weapons from the U.S. military-industrial complex and enforce an apartheid? $3 billion is a hands-off approach. And of course, it's not the fact that Israel's government is moving far right. That's not what's wrong with them, right? The fact that their government is moving towards being more openly extremist and more openly anti-Arab and anti-Palestinian is because that's what the whole settler colonial project of Israel has been based on since the beginning, right? They were founded, they seized their original territory with the Nakba, which pushed 75% of the Palestinian people into refugee status. That was heavily funded by the British before the U.S. took over the occupation in the 60s. And since then, we've been murdering Palestinians, killing dozens of children every year. It was 2021 or 2022, there were something like 70 children killed by Israeli missile strikes, all funded by the U.S. Right? So the problem here isn't that their government is, more far right or more openly extremist. They've been extremists. They've been enforcing apartheid. They've been massacring people, attempting genocide on the Palestinians for years and years and years and years and years. And we've been funding it and giving them 2 thumbs up to do it because having Israel as an ally gives us a military colonial outpost in the Middle East. So we can do things like bomb Syria, which Israel has done like 3 times this year already. They just did again yesterday. So the problem with Israel and the apartheid they're enforcing on the Palestinians does not stem from their recent elections, which got even more far-right people in power. The reason the U.S. and Anthony Blinken and Joe Biden don't like the new Israeli government is because they make it more obvious what Israel's doing. They make it harder for the U.S. to hide the fact that they're funneling money and weapons into an apartheid state and then calling anybody who criticizes it anti-Semitic, right? Because when these Israeli politicians are openly calling for the death of Palestinians, or, laws that discriminate against Palestinians, or seizing more Palestinian land, it makes it more difficult for Biden and Blinken to lie about what they're actually funding. And that's why they don't like it. And that's the only part that Marianne Williamson's criticizing here. And I'm sure she supports a two-state solution or something.
It's, to me, the moral mission statement of the United States is the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. Obviously, the whole idea is to expand that franchise. It doesn't just mean white people, it also means black people. It doesn't just mean men, it also means women. It doesn't just mean straight, it also means LGBTQ. And I think we need to recognize that doesn't just mean Americans. So to me, the United States foreign policy, as well as our domestic policy, when it comes to Israel and Palestine, we should have equally robust support for both the security and the human rights of both people. The only way to do that at this point is through a two-state solution. Now, I understand that some people would say that
Oh man, I'm the best. I called it. Yeah, clap for me, everyone. Thank you. The reformist, progressive politician, Democratic Party politician pretending to care about the Palestinian people supports a two-state solution with continued military support for Israel. Yeah, I'm sure that'll work out well for the Palestinians. I'm sure Israel won't keep infringing on their land and keeping the West Bank as an open-air prison and shooting missiles at children like they have been for the last 70 years. I'm sure they'll stop, right, if we can just move to this mystical, magical two-state solution where the U.S. funds Palestinians equally, that exists only in the imaginations of progressives, because this is not a realistic or workable situation. A two-state solution. A two-state solution is, like I said, an imaginary idealist idea that progressives can throw out there in order to advocate for allowing the apartheid and the genocide to continue happening without getting accused of being anti-Semitic or getting attacked by a bunch of Zionists.
two-state solution is dead, then we need to resurrect it, because the only answer to that is a situation that is everything else is untenable. So the American president should stand up. I think this is one area, to be honest, where I think Obama did make an effort, and he's unpopular with a lot of people there for that reason, to be honest. But I think he did make an effort to bring the Palestinian issue onto the table in a way that it had not been before within the major political dialogue in America, and I would certainly seek to do that. I also think, if I might say, because I'm a Jewish woman, I think that I would have actually some moral authority in doing that. My support for Israel should not be at the expense.
Holy shit. Holy shit. Because I'm a Jewish woman, I can wield identity politics to support an apartheid. This is who socialists and leftists want us to support? She's literally a Zionist, you guys. She's a Zionist, and the kind of Zionist who calls people anti-Semitic if they stand up for Palestinian human rights. Wow, Marianne. Boo.
You suck. You suck. You suck. You suck.
Of my Jewish values, and as an American, my support for Israel should not be at the expense of my democratic values. Right now, it's becoming that way, and that's a problem.
Marianne, I appreciate the answer, but I talked to the Palestinian Community Network, got a lot of Palestinian allies. They would not find that to be an acceptable answer. There's one state, they have one state where everyone has equal rights under the law. The Israel Zionists are not to be trusted to implement two-state solution, as that's been shown many and many times. So I hope you have conversations with some of the Palestinians. That's a hard.
Well, wait a minute. Wait. No. Let me
you can respond to that as well, but because I know you have limited time, because also.
Okay. I would like a chance to respond.
Yeah, go ahead. And I want to ask about Ukraine.
Yeah, what I would say to you is, when you say you have a lot of Palestinian friends, how many Palestinian friends you have? I have a lot of Palestinian friends. You say you've talked to Palestinians. I have talked to Palestinians. So I don't think we have a contest here of you're telling me you know Palestinians and I don't. So that doesn't work for me. Okay? So the point is, right now.
You're the one who just weaponized identity politics first, you liar. You freaking smear merchant. Marianne Williamson does belong in the Democratic establishment and far away from any kind of revolutionary movement. Let her go do her own careerist thing, and let us pay her no more attention or give her no more support. And I mean, this is who Kyle Kulinski and people like Crystal Ball are propping up and recruited to run for president and think are going to reinvigorate the Bernie movement. They're living in the past, and they need to move on from the Democratic Party. But of course, like Kyle Kalinske hasn't changed his political opinions or his commentary in like 12 years. He just repeats how Medicare for all would be better than the current healthcare system, and calls it a day. So he hasn't moved on from the Democratic Party and trying to work within the establishment still. And it's gotten us to this absurd point where, there are people like Kalinske who are progressives supporting a literal Zionist who uses identity politics to justify apartheid and genocide. Jeez.
See, if you're not going to let me talk, honey, there's no point in this if you're not going to let me talk. If you're not going to let me talk at the things you say, then...
Honey, so condescending, this PMC bullshit. This is pissing me off. No wonder the RBN folks got mad. Honey, you just filibustered the whole time and avoided answering the question directly, right? You just said so much without saying anything of substance. You just said so many words that could have been summed up with, I'm a Zionist. And then you're going to get mad at him for asking a follow-up question and talk down to him. Honey, let me speak. You've spoken enough. We know what you think. You're a Zionist. Let him call you out on it now and explain why a two-state solution is bullshit.
And there really is no point.
We're having a conversation.
No, we're not. No, we're not. You're doing a lot of mansplaining here, and you're telling me what is. You're asking me and then not giving me a chance to respond. So there's no reason for me to be in that. Well, and now more men are going to be laughing at me. So no, this is not working for me. So this is how I feel. I do believe there should be equally robust support for both Palestinians and Israelis. There is not now in American policy.
Bro, what was that? He just hit the spinning T-pose on her ass. Oh my gosh, what was that? Oh, that was so funny. That was so funny. We need equally robust support for Palestinian people and Israeli people. Yeah, that'll fix it. Right now, the Israelis have missiles from Raytheon that they're firing at children in Gaza. And the Palestinians and Hamas are fighting back with literal fireworks, high-powered fireworks that they've tried to turn into rockets. But, if we give them both more weapons, if we give them both a robust military support, that will fix the conflict. Are you dumb? Are you literally dumb? Are you even listening to yourself? Like, no wonder you just got spinning T-posed on. Now, I agree, this is a little bit, maybe a little bit unprofessional for RBN, but is it not deserved? Is it not deserved? Is Marianne Williamson not spouting imperialist bullshit while acting like she is high and mighty and weaponizing identity politics? When they try and call her out for being a Zionist, she says they're mansplaining. Like, I would be more pissed off than they are by a lot.
And that must change. That is what I will say.
Do you support BDS? Oh, go ahead. I was going to say, do you support BDS, Marianne?
I would not personally, anybody should be able to boycott what they want. I would boycott things that come from the settlements, because the settlements, I think boycotting stuff from the settlements makes sense to me. Overall, the problem I have with boycotts anywhere is often it is who it hurts. It hurts Israeli citizens. It didn't have anything to do with this. It hurts Palestinians in many cases. And I don't believe it hurts the Israeli government. But I think in a situation like that, everybody should follow their own conscience, and anyone should have the legal right. When there was an effort to deny people the legal right to boycott, that absolutely would not be okay with me.
I love the work that you do.
I need to go now. Thank you so much. Sabby, honey, I really appreciate talking to you. I know sometimes we don't agree, Sabby, but I always enjoy talking to you, and it's respectful. So anytime you want to talk, I'll absolutely just let me know, okay? And thank you very, very much for having me on.
Ms. Swainson, before you go, I just want to ask you one question while I'm sitting here.
I don't know if I'm going to answer that.
I know you don't have much time.
No, I already have 10 minutes.
I have time for the proletarian, like we have time for the proletarian.
No, okay, that's so disrespectful to me as a woman, as a political figure. Okay, Sabby, if you want to talk, honey, I'll be available to you, okay?
Holy shit. Can you talk to me as a member of the working class? Since you're asking for my vote, and since you're asking for my money, and since you're asking for my energy, can you answer this one question for me as a working class person, since you're asking me for my support as a public servant? And she responds, that's so disrespectful to me as a political figure and as a woman. Weaponizing identity politics and getting mad at the working class constituency for trying to ask her a question because she's a political figure. Oh, you're a member of the political establishment. I had no idea. I'm so sorry for trying to question you. I'm so sorry for calling out the Israeli apartheid. I'm so sorry for calling out NATO's proxy war in Ukraine. I had no idea you were an establishment political figure and a woman. Otherwise, I wouldn't have wasted, if I knew you were an establishment political figure, I wouldn't have wasted any time and energy on you. That's what I think, and that's what this interview exposed. Please, you guys, please do not put your time, your energy, your support into the Marianne Williamson political campaign within the Democratic Party. Please. And, you know, there are folks now like Brianna Joy Gray, who I usually like and respect, who are like scolding RBN for this interview and for not getting behind Marianne. Tanks my respect for those people. Brianna Joy Gray, you have a huge platform, you know, that you've garnered from being not an establishment sellout, one of the few people from the Bernie industrial complex who isn't a total sellout nowadays. Right? Please do not tell your audience to go support this hack. Please do not tell your audience to go support this pro-NATO, imperialist, Zionist, petty bourgeois, spiritual hippie lady for president. That is not where the working class people who watch Brianna Joy Gray's show should put their energy. Please. Well, I'm so glad I saw that. I am too. I'm so glad I saw this. I can't believe I hadn't seen it yet. I'm so happy Eddie finally saw this. Yeah, people kept telling me that something went down with RBN and I couldn't figure out what it was. It must have been this. Wild that people would come away from this thinking Marianne Williamson looked good and RBN looked bad. Right? Literally just because working class people are trying to hold a politician accountable and ask them questions in a very rational way. Right? She freaked out because they pointed out her positions are bad. She's an imperialist. Jeez. Play more. Bet.
Okay, get her out. So I can say what I've been wanting to say and itching and saying in the background. She's full of shit. And it's a good thing that I wasn't on here because I wouldn't be able to contain myself from this fake fucking actor who was just on RBN bullshitting us. Just the same strategy they do. Hold on, Rome. Just the same strategy they do in committees when they have people like Dr. Fauci and they ask a question, they try to talk long because they don't want to talk about the other thing. That's exactly what she did because she didn't want to talk about Ukraine. And then she just starts rambling on some stupid shit so she doesn't have to answer the question. And then when she sees, hey, these motherfuckers ain't buying it. They brought in some reinforcements. Now she's saying, oh, the guy's this. She's playing this female role where she is the victim.
She's trying to say Nick was playing it.
She's playing this white female role. She's playing this white female role of, oh, a damsel in distress. Because some black people come on, Rome came on and didn't say a word. I came on and didn't say a word. We're sitting in the back. You feel intimidated because we're black. Nobody said nothing. You feel intimidated.
CJ, you know what? I came on this bitch. I got put in the background multiple times. I'm not gonna say anything about that. All I want to ask her is, how do you feel about black liberation? Does she feel the same? Nick has taught me so much about foreign policy that there is no black liberation without foreign policy. So when I look at these things, when I look at what's going on, I look at Yemen, I look at again.
Is this what people were mad about? These two who had to sit and watch this interview take place and then got to come in at the end and were pissed off? This is the same reaction I had. When I was listening to Marianne Williamson bullshit, I was getting worked into a rage. Like, this lady is a liar and an imperialist. Like, I'm not surprised they were really upset and really emotional when they got their chance to speak.
Saying Iran, Iraq, blah, blah. Niggas telling me, yeah, we just bombed 20,000 niggas. We just killed 2,000 people. Blah, blah, you know, Sebi and everybody, right? Duh. Her position is to sell us out. Her position in the party is to sell us out. So all I wanted to ask is, what is your position on black liberation? Yes, reparations are an easy goal. It's an easy target to hit. But your reparation plan isn't. I wrote a reparation bill myself. I wrote a reparation plan that will get people 10% of every corporation that had people bound by Shepherd slavery, you know, from Jim Crow slavery to fucking the prison industrial complex. We're not just talking about Shepherd slavery. We're not just talking about this and that. We're talking about every fucking thing. Everybody, Nick, see,
Bro, I'm like embarrassed right now. Like,
I didn't say nothing.
I'm embarrassed too, to be honest.
Embarrassed about what? About a woman that went bomb
No, but Rome, that's not the point. You
Let
can't
me hear what they're
ambush
saying,
people.
Rome. I can't hear. Let me hear what
The
they're saying.
thing is like you can't ambush people like that. Like we didn't even get to hear the rest of what she was going to say, and Nick didn't get a chance to
I was
close
right
out.
about you. I forgot about it.
Yeah, I mean, they probably should have cut this part out. I mean, it allows you to see the full picture, but I disagree with Sabby. I think Sabby is being nice to Marianne because Marianne was pandering to her, is what this looks like to me. Because I don't think Sabby should have said she's embarrassed right now of her co-workers. Because, I mean, they got emotional when they came on, but Nick did a really good job. Right? The reason that Marianne stormed off is because she's not used to being asked real questions. Right? That's all it is. It's like that Ben Shapiro video where he got owned by Andrew Neil or whatever, that BBC guy who asked Ben Shapiro like a few questions about the policies he believed in, and Ben Shapiro stormed off. He's like, I'm not going to do this. You're clearly a left winger. And Andrew Neil, the BBC guy interviewing him, was a right winger. And he's like, okay, Mr. Shapiro, if only you knew how ridiculous that statement was, you wouldn't have said it, as Ben's like storming out. That's how these people react. They're used to the establishment media pushing these same narratives. And you can tell Marianne there is used to feeding the establishment narrative. Yes, more needs to be done for the Palestinian people. Apartheid is bad, but I support a two-state solution and robust defense spending for Israel. Well, okay, you're a Zionist then. But that's what the mainstream media wants you to do, wants progressives to do, or sets them up to do, is be a Zionist, but a more compassionate Zionist, a Zionist who gives lip service to the Palestinian struggle. But when she's asked actual questions by actual working class people who are actually interested in Palestinian liberation, she has a meltdown. So that was Marianne who had the meltdown first before the RBN co-workers. And then for Savvy, I know it's tempting to side with Marianne because she's a popular figure and she paid you, basically was just sucking up to you. But I mean, I understand Savvy for criticizing her, the other RBN members. I just think that part should have probably been done in private, but I mean, yeah, without that ending part, without them like kind of coming at each other at the end, I think this interview looked really good for them.
I said my next question about Ukraine. You guys ran off and you came in and scared her off.
I didn't say nothing.
Yes, you did.
I didn't say nothing.
Great interview, guys.
I see. Nick is saying that Nick is mad at them for scaring her off. Yeah. I guess. I mean, I still don't really agree with Nick. But I guess I see what he's saying. Like, if Rome and CJ were just sitting in the back room and they brought themselves in at the end because they couldn't help it and they had to say something. And then that's what scared Marianne off, I guess. But I wish Nick and Sabby would be more upset at Marianne, right? I wish they would be more upset at the Democratic politician who just filibustered and then left their show when she got asked a real question, rather than try and turn it on CJ and Rome. But Nick and Sabby did a really good job in the interview of staying calm. So I guess I see how they could criticize their coworkers for not remaining calm and potentially scaring Marianne off before they could get more out of her. But again, that's a discussion for behind closed doors. That's not a discussion to have on a live stream, which maybe I'll just click off of this for now. But ultimately, the main thing people should glean from that is do not put your time, effort, money, energy into Marianne Williamson's 2024 campaign. And I mean, I looked up her opinion about the war in Ukraine, and this is the first thing that pops up. It's Voosh, the famous liberal, neoliberal, fake socialist Vish, saying that Marianne Williamson and Bernie Sanders have base takes on Ukraine. So anything that Vish says, you can always assume the opposite is true. So if he says that Marianne is having a base take on Ukraine, that means Marianne's take on Ukraine is that the Ukrainian people should be forced to their death at the hands of the Russian military by NATO at gunpoint. That every single cent of our tax dollars should be sent to proxy war in Ukraine, because that is what Vish believes.
This is amazing to me. Let's
Amazing.
listen.
I want to turn to Russia, Ukraine.
Oh, what a surprise. Vush is watching RBN. Vush is shitting on working class, smaller YouTube commentators. Less NGO think tank boosted commentators.
I understand we're all humans. We care about the people of Ukraine. Ukraine did not invade itself. We should care about, Somalia and Pakistan and Afghanistan and not just, white countries that are invaded. But what do you say to people, myself included? I mean, it just seems like there's like a blank check here for Ukraine, but not serious efforts by Biden to actually try to accelerate diplomacy, try to make a deal.
I have no idea what lefties mean. First,
Shoot, I didn't realize I had myself muted. All I said was, shut up, Vaush. We don't need to hear the NATO line on the war in Ukraine. I have no idea what lefties mean when they say we should use our money elsewhere. Not in a proxy war. Yeah, I don't know. That's a pretty standard left-wing position, Vush, that we shouldn't back NATO proxy war, pushing people to their death at gunpoint as part of a U.S. imperialist project to destroy Russia.
all right. So anyway, we're part of the NATO left.
It seems like
yes, you are.
The United States is backing endless war. That doesn't mean Putin isn't to blame, but what do you, if you're president today, how do you end this war? Because we're sending.
Oh, I thought somebody in chat was joking. In Wikipedia, Marinka, Ukraine is was. It's referred to as was citation.
Please shut up. Nobody wants this. One of his State Department handlers probably just sent him that in the chat and said, play this, show this.
Flint and many other places have gotten in a decade.
Yeah, this guy is a crazy right-winger. Vaush doesn't understand why these crazy right-wingers pretend to be leftists. He thinks that we should use our tax dollars to build up infrastructure to bring people clean water in Flint, Michigan. What an idiot. Doesn't he know that Ukraine needs more Javelin missiles? This is the true left-wing position. Everyone else is just an idiot.
First of all, the United States doesn't have the power. Neither Ukraine nor Russia are interested right now in sitting down at the table. So it's not like the United States could just say make.
That is an absolute lie. That is an absolute lie. Russia and Ukraine were moving towards a peace agreement, not only in 2014 with the Minsk agreements that the U.S. broke up, but People's Dispatch reported multiple different cases that were reported by Ukrainian media where the U.S. sent Boris Johnson or NATO sent Boris Johnson or to break up a peace agreement between Zelensky and Putin. Right? There were multiple cases where the U.S. told Zelensky, no peace agreements. We fight Putin down to the last Ukrainian, which is why anybody like Vush cheering on this proxy war is cheering on the deaths of more Ukrainians. You're wanting to push the Ukrainians at gunpoint under the barrel of NATO's gun towards the Russian military, towards their death.
Make that happen.
Oh, an instant rejection of American diabolism. Marianne Williamson coming out with the straight, the hook, the 1-2. Actually, America can.
It's accurate to say. I don't think it's accurate to say we're giving a blank check.
Yeah.
We are giving financial support and military support. There is no doubt about that, which I support. I support the same way that other leftists in Europe support. The Green Party of Germany supports the giving of.
Oh, I'm glad they know how funny that is. The Green Party of Germany. Someone, I think it was Chris Hedges, did this long report about the Green Party in Germany and like these green sort of progressive environmentalist parties' history of supporting not just warfare and imperialism, but fascism. Right? Whenever it comes time to take an anti-imperialist position, the Green parties have this long history of caving. And there were a couple of reports of how the Green Party in Germany is now taking a more imperialistic, a more far right, a more militarized position than a lot of the right-wing parties in Germany. And Germany, of course, is the place where Angela Merkel, the prime minister, said the Minsk agreements, the peace agreements that the U.S. broke up between Russia and Ukraine in 2014, NATO never had any intention of following those. Right, it was just a way to buy time and build up Ukraine's military so that they could, launch more attacks into Russia. So everything Marianne Williamson said is a lie, right? And she's trying to hide behind the fact that the Green Party supports this. So yeah, moral of the story here: don't give your money to Marianne Williamson's campaign. You might as well give it to Voosh. You might as well donate to Voosh's stream so he can prey on more underage children in his Discord chat. Your money will be used better by him than it will be by Marianne Williamson's campaign. So there you go. Can you respond to this TikTok? I will next time, I promise. But for now, I have to go. I'm sorry. I have to finish up my last second packing. I'm mostly packed, but I have to make sure I've got everything I need and then hit the road for Chicago. So thank you all for hanging out on this stream. It'll be the last stream I'm on for the next, it'll be a while because I'll be in Virginia. So probably Sunday or Monday, depending on how much energy I have, is when I shall return. But thanks for hanging out. I hope you enjoyed the stream. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can help us financially by becoming a YouTube member, a Twitch subscriber, or a Patreon supporter on patreon.com/MidwesternMarks. That financial support makes our project possible. Carlos's new book, Marxism and the Purity Fetish, or The Crisis of Western Marxism, the Purity Fetish, is coming out soon, so stay tuned for that. Your financial contributions are what make that possible as well. So thank you all very much. Solidarity forever. Let's go organize our communities and workplaces.